Alright, what's going on, Giants fans? I wanted to make this video week before the season, trying to think of some content, getting ready for the season, pumped, and I stole this idea. I'm going to rank the New York Giants practice squad players and levels of importance. So it's, one, how good are they, how good do I think they are, and like how could they impact the Giants 2021 season. So I stole this idea from Zach Rosenblatt, who writes for them at NJ.com. So go give him a follow on Twitter, maybe subscribe to NJ.com, check out his version of it. Because something you learn in life is you're allowed to steal from people if you know them and you acknowledge that you're stealing. It's just the way life goes. But anyways, Bobby Skinner, like, subscribe. Ranking the New York Giants practice squad and level of importance. So we're starting at number one. I don't want to do a countdown where it's like you're just waiting for number one. Number one, Matt Skura, center. Now, this is partly because of player caliber, but mostly because of situation. Matt Skura, he's started 4 years in the NFL for the Ravens, 28 years old. He started 51 games for the Ravens the past 4 seasons at center. And the Ravens have been a really good run team. They've been a really good offense, Obviously, Lamar Jackson being added has a huge part of that. But, Matt Skura did a decent enough job, especially after being an undrafted free agent out of Duke, to get in there and play the way he did. I watched him. I think he's closer to what Billy Price is than Billy Price is to Nick Gates. Matt Skura is going to be on this roster at some point. I really do think so. And at the interior offensive line position, there's 3 spots, left guard, center, right guard. Well, right now they have 2 depth spots, and Billy Price and Ben Bredesen. So if one player goes down, Matt Skura gets put into the Giants on the Giants roster, and Shane Lemieux is already battling through an injury. So Matt Skura, this is like the combination of need and player ability with him being in here. And I would not be surprised if he ends up playing games for the New York Giants because, injuries happen every single year. Shane Lemieux's battling with one. And Matt Skura has played a lot of games in the NFL. So I was very surprised that he was cut and was even willing to go on a practice squad because I think with as bad as O-line players around the league, he should be on a roster. So Matt Skura, number one. Number two, Trent Harris, outside linebacker, 25 years old. He was on the roster last year. He was claimed by the Dolphins. And he made the initial 53, but when the Giants claimed Quincy Roche, both Miami guys, by the way, Trent Harris was the one to go. And honestly, they might even view Harris above Roche right now, but Roche is the higher ceiling long-term play. And the fourth outside linebacker is a position where that guy is going to get reps in a game. Whoever is the fourth outside linebacker after Lorenzo Carter, Azeez Ojulari, and Oshane Ximines is going to get reps week 1. So I wouldn't even be surprised if Trent Harris might be the practice squad call-up and they play him over Quincy Roche because Roche is just brand new to the team and the system. But Harris, I don't want to say he looked good last year, but he had a decent camp. He's only 25 years old. He can drop back in the coverage, can play that inside stack linebacker where needed, so versatility is huge in the Giants' defense and what Patrick Graham likes to run. Had a sack in the game, but he had the most reps last year. 48% of the reps versus Philly. He had a sack in that game. And he's versatile. So, I wouldn't be surprised if he's playing week 1, even as a practice squad call-up, because if you remember, they're allowed to call up 2 practice squad players a week to play on the active roster without having to lose their practice squad designation. Number 3, late addition to this team, Ryan Izzo, tight end, 25 years old, former 7th rounder by the Patriots. Izzo was a starting tight end for the Patriots the past 2 seasons. And I went and watched his game, week 1 game versus Miami last year with the Patriots because I know they ran the ball a ton in that game. He was a good blocker. He may be the best run blocker on the team. And he can play that fullback H-back role where he can lead block the way Caden Smith does. And in line, he might be a better blocker than Kyle Rudolph. Because Rudolph's a good blocker. He's not a great blocker. It's compared to Evan Ingram, he's amazing. But he doesn't add anything in the receiving game. I mean, last year in 12 games, he had 13 catches, 199 yards. But like I said, he was the starter for the last Tom Brady New England Patriots. He was the starter last year for the Cam Newton Patriots. And the Giants ran the second most 3 tight end personnel in the NFL last year, only to the Browns. They were first. They like to use their tight ends, heavy packages, and Ingram's hurt. Ingram's injured right now. I don't think Ingram's playing week 1. Rudolph coming back off the foot injury. He seems to be good to go. Caden Smith missed practice. He was on the side of practice on Monday. There's been no details on that. But still, the Giants use their third tight end They were probably going to keep 4 tight ends on the roster if Levine Toilolo didn't get hurt. So Ryan Izzo, he's been a starter in the league right now as a practice squad tight end for us. Like he started 12 games for the New England Patriots last year. So I have him third. Fourth, and I actually viewed this guy as the most potential just to be a good NFL player in general out of anybody on the practice squad. It's 25-year-old former second-round pick by the 49ers, Dante Pettis. If you remember, the Giants claimed him midseason after the 49ers waived him. And he played a decent chunk in the final 2 games of the season, 45%, 34% of the reps in those last 2 games. Hauled in 4 catches for 76 yards and a touchdown. He looked pretty good, had some chemistry with Daniel Jones. He could play in, that slot receiver and outside. As a rookie, he was a second-round pick, so they kind of gave him playing time, 27 catches, 465 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Again, another guy like Trent Harris, who was on the final roster, and then they claimed Colin Johnson from the Jaguars, and Dante Pettis was the corresponding move. But, one, you look at the injuries. Kenny Galladay missed time. He's missed games before. Shep has missed timed. John Ross is on IR. He could come in and play. And honestly, if with Shep's contract, he could be the future backup slot receiver to Kadarius Toney. I know that's not the highest praise, but it is that. Number 5. And this guy was Kenny Wiggins until the Giants waived him an hour or 2 before I did this video. And I'm glad, because I didn't like Kenny Wiggins and I wasn't going to say anything nice about Kenny Wiggins. It was simply just going to be what the Giants view him as. But number 5, rounding the top 5, Jackson Barton, 26 years old, offensive tackle, was a 2019 7th-round pick by the Chiefs. Giants claimed him off waivers last year after the 53-man cutdown day. Had a solid preseason. And again, this is more about situation. He's the first offensive tackle off the practice squad if Thomas, Parrott, or Solder go down. So right now their tackles are Thomas, Parrott, and Solder miss time. Maybe Nick Gates would play over him in an emergency situation, which I probably would prefer, but it would suck to ever get to that point. But, if if Andrew Thomas gets injured and they put Parrott at left and Nate Solder at right tackle or whatever, Jackson Barton will be pulled up to the roster. Maybe he won't be the emergency tackle if 2 of those guys down, but he will be on the roster. So Jackson Barton over situation. Number 6, and this is, Sills Army. Everybody loves this guy. David Sills, 25 years old. I don't need to tell you much about this guy. You guys all know him. 6'3", contested catch wide receiver. Guy had 33 touchdowns his last 2 years at West Virginia. Was a QB who switched to wide receiver. Had a good preseason. Not maybe as good as people cracked it up to be, but it was a good preseason. He's followed Daniel Jones around the country the last 2 years. Every single picture of Daniel Jones working out in the offseason, there's David Sills next to him. I mean, they just ran routes, whether it was Alabama, Arizona, North Carolina. Daniel Jones was there. David Sills was also there. And again, I mentioned the injuries with the wide receivers. He's a contested catch guy. He can kind of fill that Galladay role, and obviously nowhere near as good as Galladay, but still. Number 7, Nico Lalos. He played a decent amount in his 6 games last season, including an interception versus Cincinnati, his first game, a fumble recovery versus versus Seattle. I mean, became the guy. He just was a ball hawk. Was it a little lucky that Darnay Holmes tip an interception to him and then he'd recover a fumble? Yeah, but it doesn't matter. That doesn't fit my narrative. He was playing around 30% of the reps in 4 games before Kyler Fackrell came back in. And if you look at that Cincinnati game, he was winning reps. Now, they're a bad offensive line, but there is something to being able to beat a bad offensive line. Not everyone, a lot of practice squad players can't beat, a bad NFL offensive line in a regular season game. And the same reason he played last year could be the same reason he plays this year. He was a practice squad to start with no, pro experience, and injuries happen at that outside linebacker spot. All 4 guys are going to play. I know Cam Brown is on the roster, but he is a pure specials guy. So if Nico Lalos is on the roster, if you're an outside linebacker and you're on the roster, you're going to play. So he's 7th. He would be 4th on my list if it wasn't for Trent Harris already being on the practice squad. Number 8, and this guy was just put down to the practice squad, so you're like, oh, wow, this guy was on the active roster up until the night before you recorded this, and he's 8th, CJ Board, 27-year-old wide receiver, in 14 games, had 11 catches, 101 yards. The reason I have him lower is just because he wasn't on the roster to play wide receiver. He was a special teams guy. And honestly, they didn't even use him that much in special teams in 2020. He only played 20% of the snaps, and like I said, he was active for 4 of those games, or for 14 of those games. So he was on the active roster. They've got Keon Crossan and Cam Brown to be their gunners with other special teams players too. They just brought back Nate Ebner. They got Cullen Gillespie on their roster. So I just think he's way more replaceable than guys like Dante Pettis and David Sills. Not to say they're world beaters. I just think he's more replaceable. And honestly, who do you want returning kicks? C.J. Board, who was listed as the first one on their depth chart, or Kadarius Toney? Give the rock to Kadarius Toney. Let him return kicks, especially since he's not supposed to be like in the main wide receiver rotation to start at least. Number 9, Dexter Williams, running back, was claimed by the Packers after they cut him. The Packers drafted him in the 6th round in 2019 out of Notre Dame. Never really got on the field. Only had 7 carries and 2 yards. But right now, Gary Brightwell is the running back 3. He's a specials guy. He might be a better runner than Gary Brightwell and a better receiver and better blocker. And if Saquon or Booker will go down, well then our practice squad running back gets called up. Or even if Gary Brightwell to get hurt in it, Dexter Williams would be called up onto the roster. So I have Dexter Williams, running back, number 9. Number 10, I wish he was higher, but it's situation. David Moa, defensive tackle, 25 years old, out of Boise State. Had a really good preseason, especially in the run game. Was racking up a bunch of tackles for a loss. Any other team, he might have made the roster, let alone would have been top of their practice squad. But the Giants are just stacked at defensive tackle. I mean, their 5th defensive tackle in the rotation last year is Austin Johnson. He played 21% of the reps. They had 0 injuries at that spot. So they like to use their defensive tackle. So that is like the saving grace of Mose. If he gets on the roster, they'll use him. But they traded B.J. Hill. They put Raymond Johnson in there. So if Raymond maybe isn't immediately ready or one injury, it launches him in there and he'll get some playing time most likely. But it's just they're so stacked at that position. That's why I have David Mayo so low at 10. 11, I may not even believe this one at 11, but I'm like, you know what? I'm not putting him last. Sandro Platzgummer, running back from Austria, part of the NFL International Pathway Program. And I just love that pathway program. I love the way they're trying to grow the game. He's got like a little scat back to him. Decent athlete. Had that 50-yard run versus the Jets in the preseason. In fact, my buddy actually played against him in Austria, and he tore up the EuroLeague. His issues in the NFL, he's just way too small. And he'll get abused by NFL linebackers and pass rushers. I mean, you look at him, they asked him to block one play, and he got blown up. So he probably will never make his way on the roster. But I was like, you know what? I'm not putting Sandro 17th. I'm sorry. I'm putting Sandro at 11. Number 12, very new addition. Corey Cunningham, offensive tackle, was just claimed. He was a free agent for the past week. Kind of a weird story. I would have him higher based on position, but he was available for 7 days without anybody claiming him until the Giants came around. 2018 was a 7th round draft pick by out of Cincinnati by the Cardinals. He's 6'6", 315 pounds. Started 6 games that rookie year. The next year, the Patriots traded a 6th round for him, but he never starts. He never started a game. Got some reps here and there for them. I watched him in the preseason versus the Giants this past season. Didn't look horrible. Now he was going against our last string of players, but he didn't look good. So I'm putting Corey Cunningham at 12. Number 13, Matt Cole, wide receiver / cornerback / special teams. He was the guy who played cornerback in that Browns preseason game. Big time special teamer. So I put in my notes, C.J. Board injury could be his play, but then after that, the C.J. Board got moved down to the practice squad. Guys like that, though, seem to stick around. Like Matt Cole, I could see him being on this Giants practice squad for a long time because, Joe Judge loves special teams, and this guy plays wide receiver, cornerback, and specials. So Matt Cole at 13. Number 14, Willie Henry, defensive tackle, was a defensive tackle they added when they moved off R.J. McIntosh. In fact, they did it on the day of FanFest. Giants are really healthy at defensive tackle, plus Mo is ahead of him. He's been in the league since 2016. He played with the Ravens for a little while. So Willie Henry, 14. Number 15, I got Jake Hosman, tight end. Played a decent amount in the preseason, didn't do really anything special. Tight ends could be hurt, that's his way. He only had 2 catches at Ohio State, so there's a fun fact about Jake Hosman. Number 16, QB Brian Lewerke. I don't know how you pronounce it. He would be the backup QB if Jones gets hurt, but last year when Jones got hurt, they brought in Tanny. So this is what I would have him higher, but I think if Jones were to get hurt, I think they would probably pull in some free agent vet like a Josh Johnson type or something to the roster instead of throwing Lewerke in there. I think it's just they want their practice squad QB to be some type of developmental guy, and if he can shine in some type of preseason action, I don't know. So Brian Lewerke, 16. And number 17, Chris Myarick, tight end. Played 8 snaps last year for Miami, out of Temple. I don't know anything about him, to be honest, but we already got Jake Hausman and Ryan Izzo ahead of him on the Giants practice squad. So I'm putting a tight end number 17. Go look at his Pro Football Reference page and see how many times, like, little mini transactions he had with the Dolphins. So, all right, appreciate you guys watching this video to the end. This is the first video where you heard Chris Myarick talked about. I guarantee that. Unless you're a Temple fan. So like, subscribe, do all that good stuff. We appreciate you guys. See you on the next time. Podcast, film breakdown, whatever. Let's go Big Blue.